We've invited two of the artists from the exhibition, Carol Sinclair and Susie Redmond. Carol Sinclair is a ceramic artist, Susie is a handloom weaver. They both have pieces of work in the show that are quite next to each other, physically in the space, which I have only just remembered, which is really quite nice. So there's a conversation between those in the exhibition, and there'll be a conversation between Susie and Carol here. Still Kate on the stage to link it all together, so it's back to this hag thing.
Still here.
Which is fantastic. So I'm going to pop down. I hope everyone can still hear us. If there is any problem with the noise, wave and attract my attention at the back, and we'll try and make sure that the microphone is passed around, but we think we're okay in that place here. So I think we should just pick straight up, Kate, back from the end of that conversation you were having with Zoe. Because I think there were some really interesting questions that came up for me, some things I actually remembered in our conversation way back when I first started talking to you about the exhibition. And you said your words, so think about it, come back with something, and you came back with this hag idea. And we loved the title immediately between us, but I think we were also going, how do we approach an artist and say, should we do this exhibition? And we decided we weren't going to mention the title, we were just going to talk about the theme of the show, and then bring in that idea of what that title would be. And we talked a little bit, quite interesting, between hag and hags as well. I think what we did do, and I think it's quite fascinating, the artists in this show have incredibly established careers. They're really innovative, interesting women making incredibly innovative, interesting work, and if you're particularly interested in ceramic or if you're interested in textile, you'll know those artists' work, I think, quite well. And a lot of those artists were aware of each other. But then we invited everyone to join us for a meeting to talk about, so we had an online chat with all of us, and quite a lot of them, one of the best bits of feedback from that meeting was that some of the artists, I can't remember who said it, was like, this is great, there's some artists here who have admired their work for years and years and years, and yet I've never met them, and then suddenly this exhibition gave everyone the opportunity to talk together online, and that exhibition meeting was one of the best bits of this whole process, I think. And it was there that we sort of started discussing hag, and I think we were talking hags at the time.
Yeah, it was hags to start with.
Yeah.
And after that conversation, we decided to drop the S because it was like I was calling them all hags in the show. It seemed more derogatory that way with the S on the end rather than not, and it was more punchy without the S. So it was definitely something that we listened to and something that we responded to and realised that actually it did sound a lot better with it just being hag.
Yeah, and I think that's a very subtle bit of the reclaiming of that word that has actually been quite important to the whole calling it hag.
It's amazing how one letter can change the whole thing, because if the exhibition it was called Hags, I think you would go in expecting to see people and see hags, as it were, but dropping that S has just definitely made a huge impact.
And we've tried to carry that all the way through. For those of you who've been able to buy a catalogue already, you'll be able to see through. We've actually talked to the artists all the way through about what they like to call themselves and how they like to describe their own practice. So you'll see in there's 3 or 4 different ceramic artist makers, but everyone's got a slightly different way of describing themselves, and that's come from the artists themselves. So again, we've always tried to make sure that we're talking to artists about how they perceive themselves. I think that's come a lot from you as well, Kate, about how you've got a practice that goes back. You say, I can now call myself a curator, but one of the reasons for inviting you in was that you've got a practice that's gone back way back, that's always naturally collaborative. And I feel like that's come through into this exhibition. Another part of the process that I don't think we touched on as much this morning was the photography. And I do recommend if you go into the exhibition, make sure you don't miss out on that far in gallery. They're in the catalogue as well, but there's 13 amazing portraits of the artists through this exhibition, and that was part of that reclaiming that narrative, because the work speaks for itself in the gallery space, and then you go through, and then you see those photographs of those amazing artists. The process of doing that was amazing. We obviously just had to we had to find the right photographer for a start. We had this brilliant photographer, Lydia Smith, who I would really recommend people find out more about. Follow Miss Lydia Photo. I just wondered if you would mind, Carol or Susie, telling us about the process of being photographed.
It was a lovely experience taking Lydia out into the way back. It must have been about November or January, something like that. Winter anyway. And there I was, busying myself around, scraping away around the little shoots that were coming up and picking on the cuttings that we planted last year. And Lydia is there just walking around, we're just blathering away, she's taking photographs, and I'm almost oblivious to what she's doing. And I have been a bit worried because I don't really like getting my photograph taken, but it was actually a really enjoyable time. And then she came along to my studio, and again, it was just fine. I was just doing what I normally do in my studio. So she wasn't at all intrusive. And she seemed to have this really lovely understanding of the materials and how we use our hands with those materials. And it was really, at the end of the day, I was just really feeling very thankful for the way that she dealt with the way we worked with the natural materials and all of the other things going on in the studio.
Yeah, it was a really joyful and comfortable experience. You know, we just chatted. We had a lovely time, and we just chatted, and we asked each other questions, and just that the way that we sort of approached it from process. Because actually, I discovered I don't really like having people in my studio that much because it's my space. So actually, having somebody coming in, and just being very respectful but very interested in what I was doing. Taking lots of shots of my hands, and then working up to that dreadful portrait thing that none of us that I know of enjoy that part of it. It's not about us, it's about the work we make. So actually having our faces captured is quite terrifying. And actually you were so kind, and I was so relaxed by the end of it that it was very natural and I felt really comfortable. So thank you for that.
I think it really comes across in that photography. She's managed to capture everyone's working space and working practice and personality really, really well. So
I think it's important to say as well that the photography, although we commissioned Lydia to do the photography, it wasn't intended to be as a big part of the exhibition. But when we saw the photos, we were just like, no, this needs to take centre stage, and it needs to be a bigger presence in the exhibition because it's a huge part of it, and it wasn't necessarily just about the work, and it was about the people and the lives and the stories and the materials and everything involved in that exhibition. It's again my attraction to the process, and that without a doubt has to be coming from the artist as well. So it made sense that actually they took more centre stage than what they might have felt comfortable with. And now they have their big faces on the wall.
How big are we? I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you're not huge. It's not like size.
but I think it brought home to us when we first saw them as well. The whole team at Five Contemporary were just thinking, you don't see very many photographs of women over 50 in the media very much, and if you do, it's trying to catch people off guard, or it's politicians who have to sort of push themselves forward in a very particular way. It was really quite refreshing and really invigorating to see them. It's another reason we put them on the wall, and it's because they were taken so naturally. The way you described it, I think, is really, really beautiful. So I want to have a little bit of a chance to talk a bit about your work and how. Basically, how did you both feel when you were invited to be part of this show? Was it sort of okay to be?
I jumped at it. When I spoke to Kate and she said, I'm thinking about this idea. The idea of celebrating older women is just so unusual, and it was such a privilege. So there was really no kind of question about getting involved. It was like, yeah, I'm in. But I think it is quite interesting to just reflect on that word hack, because I think I was full of enthusiasm and yes, fantastic. And then there was mention of the word hack. And it is so interesting because I remember, and I don't know if you even noticed, but when you said it, I flinched. There was a physical reaction to that word. And it was a little bit like, it was an insult. It was a bit like a physical reaction of being slapped.
Sorry.
But actually, in that twinkling of an eye, I went, God, yes, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to use this language which is controversial, and we need to speak about these words that we use to describe older women. And, you know, certainly I hadn't been nearly as aware of the language I was using, throwing away, you know, calling people witches perhaps in a joking way. But actually there's an enormous amount of oppression and subjugation built into that. And so it's been a real gift to me to look at those words and start thinking about, you know, how I talk about people.
And so when it got to the pieces of work you've made for the show, because you've made these new, they're new for the show.
Yes.
So how did you go about approaching? Could you just introduce everyone, I think, here to what your process is?
What the heck it is, I think, yes.
and then yeah, say how that's been changed or affected by the choice of making you work for the show.
Okay, so I work with porcelain primarily, and the pieces I've made for the show are 3 bottle shapes, so very sculptural bottles, not so much functional pieces, but sculptural pieces. And I very deliberately made them out of 3 different types of clay. I think the black one that's there was one I had already made, and Kate immediately sort of said, yep, that has a presence, let's include that. But let's think about adding another couple of pieces to speak to that. And the pieces are called After the Storm, and they are very much inspired by, I now live, I've been a city girl most of my life, but I now live in the countryside. And when there are terrible storms, of which there are many more these days, my studio is surrounded by branches and broken twigs. And so the patterns that I create in these pieces are inspired by that. Because I think, as you said earlier, I'm a slightly quiet activist, and I want my work to talk about things that I think are really important. And that's absolutely something that's come of age, of the need to do something that just can have a small impact somewhere. I'm not trying to change the world, but I'm trying to have conversations to provoke thought. So the grey piece, so I've got the black piece, I've got the white porcelain, which is my normal kind of working material, and then there was an opportunity with this exhibition to do a bit of alchemy, which was one of my main ambitions. And I've reclaimed clay that I wasn't able to use in any other way, and I've created a new recipe, and I've created this luscious velvet grey porcelain that Kate said she was going to lick. So yes, so that's I don't. That's part of the story. Yeah.
So I'm just being Susie is so when we had that, we would have those conversations. How did you feel about it?
Oh, when I got the email, my first thought was, but it started off this conversation in my head before I actually responded to you. But a lot of the conversation in my head was about age, in a chronological sense, and thinking about the biological markers that are associated with age, but also thinking about it in terms of a social construction. And really, what is it about getting older that is so so negative, maybe? And so we have these markers that are probably more to do with health economics, than more to do with our social security system, than they are actually about that number that we happen to have arrived at. And I started to think then again about what's happening at both ends of the life course, and thinking that, it's only fairly recently that we've acknowledged that we need to listen to children and young people. And so there's something going on at either end of the life course that is really important for us as a society to have to think about. And so there's all of that going in there, and we never call children and young people hag, but we call older women hag. And how does all of that arise? And so I came to the Zoom meeting with all of that going, I'm not hag. And I think I was quite relieved when we decided to take the S off, because then to me it makes sense, and I can live with that. Although I'm probably never likely to use the term hag in relation to using it with another person. But I think that there is a lot that we need to do in our thinking about what it is to be old and getting older. And I bring myself always back to Annie Albers, a Bauhaus weaver, who was still scrubbing about under her loom and weaving when she was 92. So I'm going to be at the platform studio, looking after the meadow and scrubbing under my loom for quite some time.
So would you just describe what your practice is, what you do, how you make?
Yeah, I've got a lovely wooden floor loom. It's traditional. Not quite as big as the one that you see in the museum here, but it works in a similar kind of way. And I've been experimenting over the past few years with different materials. So weaving, I love linen, I grow flax, and so I've actually got a linen warp on the loom and the long threads that run up and down. And then weaving in weft, I've been using some really beautiful paper. A Japanese paper, some of it is bound with a little bit of silk. It's absolutely gorgeous to weave with. And then some heavier papers as well. And I found that paper behaves very, very differently to weaving with wool or a soft cotton or a softer linen. It has some structure. And so when these big paper woven pieces come off the loom, they are springy, and they're going to do something really different to maybe, when I'm making a scarf, I'll just wrap it around myself and prance around the studio for a minute. I can't do that with paper ones. So that was kind of the beginnings of it.
And then because it's got quite a structure to it, that's where is that where these sort of vessel shapes, because they're right next to Carol's in the exhibition, and they are woven, but they're like they might be ceramic or they might be basket, but they're not.
No, that's right. They're stitched together to make vessels, and that all came from two ideas that were running through my head at the same time. I've been thinking about bags, and the very thing that we need in our human existence is something to carry our stuff in. And so in times gone by, when people were being thrown off their lands in the island clearances, they had to put their treasures, their belongings in something, and it was a bag. Even though you have to have clothes with very big pockets, and you never ever buy a skirt or a dress that doesn't have big pockets. So yes, the bag is important cross-culturally, and it's important in our sort of, as an anthropology across time, I suppose. And then the other thought that was going on in my head as well is, what do I use all this my bag for? I'm never without it if I'm going for a walk in the woods or if I'm going to the beach, because I cannot go anywhere without bringing back something. Would you like to see my collection? Well, I have a bag here. It's not my usual bag for going out into the woods. But here, we have something very beautiful. This is a piece of bark, and I was walking in the woods just the other side of Dunfermline, and the inside of the branch had completely rotted down, and so I'm left with this sleeve. And all I did was get an old toothbrush and give it a scrub to get some of the detritus off it, and you'll see it has the most beautiful colours and all these little natural slits in it. And there's a piece in the exhibition here called Evening, which is an Old English word for evening or twilight. And it's very, very much mirrors this shape here. You're welcome to have a look. This is what I love. Here we have, it's more bark, and I think that one is birch, this one is willow. And don't you think that it's just a lovely thing in its own right? Nature just doing its stuff without any help from me. Yeah? And it makes the most perfect place for displaying little stones. So we put a hagstone in the little dish, collect stuff, which I'm sure most of you do, you know that they become your treasures and you love them as much as your best earrings and other stuff. And they sit there, and I would probably take quite a lot for me to go to part with this. So do have a look. And then one last thing, like I've got all my shelves. But this one I wanted to show you as well. This is home on the beach. It's been warmed by the sea. And you'll see these lovely curves in it. And really, Barbara Hepworth could not do that. Absolutely lovely. Do you want to pass it on? Yeah, so this whole idea of what that nature is doing for itself without any help really kind of influenced what I was doing. So I thought, well, I am actually going to use it some help, or rather, it's going to help me. It has to be that way around. And so in my weaving, so moving from weaving with wool and linen, I brought the outside into my weaving. And I'm just really enjoying experimenting with all of that.
I mean, that's a wonderful connection across your practice, because obviously you also collect, or you look, or you go to these sticks outside after a storm.
Yeah.
That brings them into some connection.
Yes, I mean, I suppose that's the thing that I sort of think of it as almost nature giving me a bit of a message. Do you know, when I see the debris that sort of sits around the garden, I'm kind of thinking it's nature going, excuse me, we have to pay a bit more attention here, because, there is a climate emergency, there is something changing in the storms that we're experiencing, and it's our fault, and we need to do something about it. So, I think nature is very good at giving us a hint,
Yes.
especially, some of the other pieces I've been doing recently are based on trees that come down in my garden because of the storms. So, these things are really important in my day-to-day environment, and the things that, therefore, I want to really speak about in my work.
Does environmental change or impact what you're doing? Because I know you forage, but do you also grow willow? Or
Unfortunately, I'm a volunteer in a lovely walled garden it's the Ravens Craig walled garden, a kilometre with well worth a little trip. And there's a corner of that garden which you can give away with willows. So myself and 5 basket makers are looking after it.
And does the willow sort of, how do you grow willow to be able to make it a basket?
Well, Lisa can chip in if I'm getting started. But we can take, willow is something that desperately wants to live, and you can take a little cutting, about a pencil-sized cutting, and you just literally put it in the ground, and it will do its stuff. And then in a year's time, in the winter time, when the leaves are no longer any leaves on it, you can cut the willow rods. Some of the willows in this garden, they grow 15 feet in a season. They are huge. The kind of things that you'd use to make beautiful garden arches and that kind of thing. So what we've been working on in the willow garden is planting lots of new cuttings so that we can grow beautiful slim willows for basket making. And so it's amazing fun. In a year you can actually get something that you can use. And it comes in lots of different colours.
Which you can see subtly in your work as well.
Yes.
So bringing back to both of your work together in the gallery, they're both vessels, they're both things you can put things into. And I guess, I know that's quite important to talk about, carrying a bag and that the vessels particularly important with ceramics. I mean, that's the core of it, really.
Yeah, I suppose, I've been making for 33 years or so, and for a large part of that I actually made ceramic tiles, so very functional, very flat pieces. So when I think this new body of work has really been evolving for maybe 10, 12 years now, and taking what was a very flat slab and then making it into something more three-dimensional. But I have to say, having had so many years of doing something very functional, I think that you might mention it earlier, I mean, for me it's really important to be doing other things now. I don't really want to do churn, I want to do things that inspire me creatively. and can provoke conversations. So for me, I see these vessels, I mean, they are perfectly functioning. You know, it's high-fired porcelain, it could be used as a vase, but for me it's a medium for story. It's a medium for talking about something important. It's a container of meaning, if you like, rather than a container necessarily of tea. I do always remember at college, people would come around and say, you know, what's it for? What do you use it for? And I think that's my subversion, is that I don't really want people to use it. I want them to look at it and contemplate it and think about it. And although the bottles I have here have only, you know, the outside surface, I also make pieces that have a different contrasting inside. So the conversation between the inside and the outside becomes really important. So I am using vessels, but in a very kind of abstracted and sculptural way.
And that's quite interesting because you're both working at quite, they work so formally well together next to each other in the show because they have that structural connection. I don't know, Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about vessels in the show? Because I think we talked about quite a long way back. We were thinking, it's that whole cauldron thing, which we're going to, that's kind of interesting, but also it's a bit cliche. We were sort of playing around with that quite a bit when we were starting, probably before we even talked about how I do. But yeah, there are a lot of plots in it.
There are a lot of plots. I don't think that was it. It wasn't
I
intentional.
don't think it was either, but it's
It wasn't
interesting to come out like that.
Yeah, I think maybe that is the subtle kind of impression that maybe the theme has had on me.
Yeah.
And I think Patricia's is probably the most that you could
Yes.
be witchy.
The Christian pieces are very, very dark fire.
It's on the posters.
And the stuff
and-
is, yeah,
yeah.
the posters are what we used, the beautiful photography that was taken of them actually being fires.
Yeah, it's very fiery, very
Yeah.
dark and very... But I think that was very much on purpose for the promotion
Yes.
of it, to kind of lure people in
Yes.
and then be like, Mama! She's a But yeah, the vessel thing, that again was an unintentional theme that came out of it, like the light and dark and the blue. So it definitely wasn't my intention going into it to have the vessels.
You sort of touched on it, but we're not going to make that deliberate, but it's
Yeah, it just came naturally. Yeah.
Is there any questions anyone would like to ask of any of the artists here, or thoughts, ideas? I know that it's one of those questions. You probably, I bet there's someone out there who's going to talk about
But I just feel about even more.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about beauty as a language of activism.
Yes. I love that concept because I think that, you know, I suppose it actually, thinking it through here, one of the problems I often find is that if I'm outspoken, which I have been known to, people think of me as a nagging woman. And they will very quickly turn away from listening. But my husband is not here. Says that women speak a pitch that just he can't hear. He doesn't want to listen to. So I think there's definitely something about finding alternative ways to get your message across. And for me, and going back to the vessel idea, that if somebody is comfortable with the vessel, what you can do is sneak up on them and do something that sort of actually makes them think differently. And I often quite deliberately create pieces that have sort of, if you like, 3 layers of meaning, that I will want to make them aesthetically pleasing because I want people to be drawn to them. I want them to come and look and be intrigued. And as they come a bit closer, I'll tell them, the pattern, you know, for these bottles. So I'll say that, you know, it's called After the Storm. The pattern is taken from broken branches, and they sort of, okay, they can come in a bit closer to that. They can understand that. They can look at it, be interested. And then if they are really ready, we'll go to the world's in deep danger, and we need to do something about it. Yeah. You know, and it's our shared responsibility. Let's have a conversation about how we can make a change or do something differently. So, does that kind of answer your question? By stealth. That's my method.
I think it's a bit like the activism of daily life rather than a special event. It's as we're going about our daily whatever, it's going for the walk, taking care of things, making sure that gardens aren't being built on, and playgrounds aren't being built, playing fields aren't being built on. It's what we just do in the course of life that is the activism, and there is beauty in that, I think, and satisfaction in that, isn't there?
It's something that has occurred to me as we've been putting the show up, is that idea of, it's a sort of bit of a cliche with craft really, that it takes a long time. It takes a long time to make, it takes a long time to learn the skills or develop the skills to make what you make. But when you think about it in the context of this show, there is an activism in that, particularly in the current world of, you flip through, I'm a attention span of a gnat now. It's the time I look at my phone all the time and just look at the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's a requirement to take yourself out of that continuous 2-second conversation and focus actually acts as a brilliant act of rebellion, actually.
And actually, if you think about it, most of the women who are in this show have been running their practices as a business for, in my case, 34 years this year. And that in itself is an act of rebelliousness, because I was damned if I was going to be employed and somebody was going to tell me what to do. I am unemployable now because that's how it works. But that act of just being self-reliant and independent, and dedicating your life. I think that's one of the things that, often people talk about craft as a sort of hobby, as a life business. It's not really a proper business, but actually it's a life's work. It's actually putting hours and hours and hours of your time into learning your material, into pushing yourself, into experimenting and taking risks. And I think we need to recognise what that takes, and that there's a resilience in all of the women in this show that is just so impressive.
I think as well, that's why I'm so hooked on the process, and in particular the way that things are exhibited. I always like to challenge that, and that's why I found it quite difficult being in a space like this and understanding that there are risks and whatever involved in displaying the works. But my thing is to always get people to understand the level of craft and skill and knowledge and everything that kind of comes with a craft. And it's exposing that part of it. And to kind of talk to your question, Lisa, is that there will be people that come and zoom around that exhibition and see the beautiful objects for what they are, and they're beautiful things, and yes, that's lovely, okay, goodbye. But again, like what you were saying, Carol, to lure people in and to bring them into that conversation, to question the title of the exhibition, to understand the people involved in the exhibition, to see the faces of the makers. I just hope that people will then delve deeper than the beauty, and almost I've used the beauty of the things to bring people in and get them through the threshold to then have the conversation and to start enlightening people, I guess.
Any other questions that are floating around? Which is some beautiful objects. Come on, I know this. No?
That's because they're really difficult.
We were obviously, the artists, most of the artists have been able to come and visit the show and be here today, so I'm really grateful to them for being here. And if anyone wants to ask anyone in particular face-to-face, I'm sure we can introduce people in the gallery spaces just later as well.
And we're doing a lovely offer right now on our catalogue and our hag bag. If you buy the two together, you get them for £13.
No, £8 tonight.
£8 tonight. I have been telling people the wrong things. So.
That's a big spooky price.
Well, that's it.
Yes. Just in general, what we've been talking about, how the women are not appreciated or very often listened to or given a voice, and of course it's International Women's Day. What has your experiences been as women artists? Have you felt that what have you had to fight against? What stigma, what prejudice? Like, or did you, like, has it been massive? Do you think it's improving? Is there hope? Are we doing?
Oh God. Yes, no, maybe. I think craft for me. I mean, I've been a craftswoman all my life, and I think we really struggle to be taken seriously because it's women's work. That's just been an ongoing thing, and I do find that in a lot of the years I've worked collaboratively with other women because there's a much greater sense of communal spirit there. And occasionally when I've got a man, but often when a guy comes in, it's a different vibe. It's a different vibe, and it's really interesting. So I think there's issues of actually needing to get out beyond our own women's groups to talk and persuade and to have influence. But there's definitely an empowering aspect of women who listen to each other.
I think my experience is slightly different to that. When people come to my studio, we have open studio events, throughout the year, and my room takes centre stage, and a lot of the conversations are about that. And a lot of the conversations are about preserving traditional skills, and people wanting to know how it works, having a shot, and especially when families come with children, their eyes open because they've suddenly clicked. This is how our clothes are made. This is how this arrives. They get a package from Amazon, a new jumper or something like that. But actually, all of this other work has gone up before, and it's really lovely, I think, for people to say, well, actually, I can do that. How do you do that? How do you have to start? Go to art school, do you do this? How do you learn how to do it? And so very, very positive experiences in the main. Sometimes people come along to the studio and they say, oh, do you work here all the time then? It's like, is it just today? Is this your real job? And I think I'm very fortunate that it is my real job.
Susie, do you think that's because there's a machine involved?
Yeah, I think
rather
so.
than just doing something?
I think it helps having that concrete thing that looks beautiful and people understand wood. It doesn't have anything fancy, like a computer attached to it. It's just got a few, dowels, nails, and all that sort of thing. And so people have a bit of an understanding of the wood and the strings and everything else, and it kind of has a resonance